The greatest of his time, critics called him, a national treasure. Today, at the age of 85, Horowitz died at his home in New York. Ron Cliburn recalls the career of a musical genius who said, "The most important thing in playing is the spirit."
For Vladimir Horowitz, piano playing was a coordination of mind, heart, and finger. But the key element, he often said, was emotion. He was one of the greatest pianists of his or any generation. One critic once described his distinctive electric style as controlled thunder. Horowitz was born in Kiev, Russia in 1904. His father was an engineer, his mother an amateur pianist.
I play piano because I saw my mother playing piano. I wanted to play like her.
After training at the Kiev Conservatory as a teenager, he left the Soviet Union in 1926 to study in the West for 6 months. He did not return. In the West, his virtuosity stunned the music world, including conductors he played with for the first time.
With first chord, he stopped to play. He stopped to conduct.
After a lifetime vow not to return to Russia, Horowitz went back in 1986. His concerts were a tour de force. Vladimir Horowitz's personal life was tempestuous. His personality at times eccentric, even brooding. But his music was always that of a genius. Ron Cliburn, ABC News, New York.
And dynamic musicians of this century. Back in just 1 minute. The greatest pianist of this century, died at his home in New York City today. He was 85. It's believed he suffered a heart attack. His spellbinding wizardry on the piano won him 19 Grammy Awards and accolades and honors the world over. ABC's Ron Cliburn has this tribute.
For Vladimir Horowitz, piano playing was a coordination of mind, heart, and finger. But the key element, he often said, was emotion. He was one of the greatest pianists of his or any generation. One critic once described his distinctive electric style as controlled thunder. Horowitz was born in Kiev, Russia in 1904. His father was an engineer, his mother an amateur pianist.
I play piano because I saw my mother playing piano. I wanted to play like her.
After training at the Kiev Conservatory as a teenager, he left the Soviet Union in 1926 to study in the West for 6 months. He did not return. In the West, his virtuosity stunned the music world, including conductors he played with for the first time.
With first chord, he stopped to play. He stopped to conduct.
After a lifetime vow not to return to Russia, Horowitz went back in 1986. His concerts were a tour de force. Vladimir Horowitz's personal life was tempestuous. His personality at times eccentric, even brooding. But his music was always that of a genius. Ron Cliburn, ABC News, New York.
Music of a great artist, Vladimir Horowitz, who died today in New York at the age of 85. Horowitz was widely considered the greatest pianist of this century. Born in Russia, he returned there in 1986 after 61 years in the West for this triumphal concert. That's the CBS Sunday Night News. I'm Bill Plant in New York. Good night, and have a good week.
Horowitz has died of a heart attack in New York. He was 85. Horowitz was once called the Greta Garbo of the concert stage because of his mysterious absences from the public. Ron Cliburn now looks back at his stunning career.
His was a style that was once described as controlled thunder. For half a century, that style made Vladimir Horowitz the towering figure of classical piano, a virtuoso many thought the greatest pianist of this century. Born in 1903 in Kiev, Russia, he first studied piano at the age of 3, taught by his mother.
I play piano because I saw my mother playing piano. I wanted to play like her.
By the time he was a teenager, he was an accomplished musician. And in 1925, he left for Europe to study for 6 months. He didn't go back. Playing in Europe and later America, Horowitz dazzled the music world with his dynamic electric playing.
The fingers are seemingly not tied together in the hands as ours are, as we ordinary people have, but they each have an independent life of their own.
The heights musically and of intensity that I have soared with him, I've had very few times in my life.
Horowitz had vowed never to return to Russia, but in 1986, he went back for a series of performances. The concerts were a tour de force. It is his music, his genius, that is the legacy of Vladimir Horowitz. Ron Cliburn, ABC News, New York.
Demon inside him that urged him to new heights as a pianist. For nearly 70 years, he dazzled musicians and non-musicians alike with his skill and his energy. On Sunday, the man once called a national treasure died of a heart attack. He was 85. NBC's Bill Schechner looks back at his remarkable career.
Wherever he played, even the White House, as he did in 1980, Vladimir Horowitz was always the star. For 60 years, Horowitz defined the word virtuoso. His last great triumph, his return to his homeland, the Soviet Union, 3 years ago. Even at 82, he was able to excite audiences. Horowitz was born in Russia but left in 1925. His American debut was 1928. He was quickly recognized as a performer who poured himself into the music. For more than 60 years, he cast an almost hypnotic spell over audiences, and he seems to have understood why. Said Horowitz about his power, "The playing must be free." Bill Schechner, NBC News, New York.
Famous pianists Byron, Janis, and Van Cliburn are going to be with us to talk about Mr. Horowitz.
Lost their home in the Bolshevik Revolution. He left Russia for good in 1925, and within a year, he was an international concert star, popular as any matinee idol, and the envy of other pianists. Horowitz played the romantic composers as if the music were written for him, as indeed some of it was. The last romantic, he was called, friendly with Scriabin, friendly with Rachmaninoff. He married Arturo Toscanini's daughter, Wanda. In 1986, after 61 years away from the Soviet Union, he returned for a memorable concert in Moscow. Here, in the land of his own childhood, a simple children's song by Schumann. Horowitz knew this: great music does not come from the fingers. It comes from the heart. And back now to Harry and Kathleen.
Thanks very much, Charlie. A little bit later on this morning, his first student, Byron Janis, is going to be here, and Van Cliburn, we're going to talk to him, too, about Vladimir Horowitz.
Here's Mark McKeon with the latest on the weather. Mark?
You know, I talk about rock and roll a lot, but we're going to miss Vladimir Horowitz, a great pianist.
It's Vladimir Horowitz from his return concert in the Soviet Union a couple of years ago. Remembering Vladimir Horowitz this morning. Well, Welcome back to CBS This Morning. I'm Harry Smith.
And I'm Kathleen Sullivan.
And I'm Mark McEwen.
In a couple of minutes, two other great pianists, Byron, Janis, and Van Cliburn, are going to be here as we pay tribute to Vladimir Horowitz, who died yesterday. The classical music world lost a giant yesterday when pianist Vladimir Horowitz died at the age of 85. Vladimir Horowitz was born in Russia but left in 1925, stayed away for 61 years. From his Berlin debut at age 23 to playing for 3 U.S. presidents, to triumph after triumph in the world's great concert halls, Vladimir Horowitz combined flawless technique with powerful emotion. And with us to remember the master are two other brilliant pianists, Byron Janis, who was Horowitz's first student, and from Fort Worth, Texas this morning, Van Cliburn. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Good morning.
How was it that you came to be his first student?
I was 16, playing a recital, playing in Pittsburgh, which was my hometown. He had played the night before and came that afternoon. He was invited to hear me play. He came backstage and said, "Will you call me when you come to New York? I'd like to work with you." That's how we met.
What was the most important thing he taught you?
The most important thing? I think probably that the piano, to make a vocal instrument out of a percussive instrument. Piano is a percussive instrument. And he said singing on the piano is the most important thing in the world. Imitate singers.
Singing.
Singing.
Van Cliburn, what made Horowitz great?
Well, I also agree with his singing tone. He was also a great admirer of the human voice, and he loved opera. I know that he was certainly a household name. From the time I was born, after my mother had heard him shortly after his debut in this country, I knew him very well all my life. And it was always that singing tone from his recordings and his personal concerts. It was very memorable. He was unique. He had great communicative ability. He loved playing for someone and wanting someone else to realize the beauty of the music he was playing.
He was such an enigmatic character and also so brilliant and drew people in and so emotive. You were with him about a year or so ago. What was he like?
Well, he was very witty. I always enjoyed his anecdotes, his talking about repertoire, pieces that he enjoyed playing the most in public, and also his experiences of certain situations for different audiences in different countries. And, oh, he was a very wonderful raconteur, and he and his wife are very dear friends of mine, and as Byron just said, we've lost a friend.
As a character, so charismatic, but some critics couldn't stand the way he played. They said he was a technical genius, but too much emotion. They said too much emotion, too much personal interpretation. Byron Janis, what's your response to that?
Well, I think that was his big. He said always in the last years, makes no difference what they say. It makes no difference to me.
Yeah.
He felt that he had to say what he had to say, and that the personal interpretation was what it was all about. Otherwise, you need one artist. I mean, if we all say the same thing, you know, what's the point? Actually, Van was saying we lost a friend. I actually lost a piece of my family because I was really part of that household for many, many years, you know, for over 45 years. And
as you were his student, did he not supply you with your first set of tales to go out and play a concert?
Yes, he did when I was 17.
Yeah.
But I became also his friend, and I used to be around the house there every evening, listening to him go through all the piano repertoire, and we used to go. He was so absolutely insistent that I traveled with them to keep my lessons every week.
Consistent.
Yeah.
Van Cliburn, as we go home today and we dust off our Horowitz records. What should we listen for? What part of that genius should we try and draw out of what we hear?
Well, I believe what we will always remember was his individualism. And remember, as Byron just said, no two people ever see the same things, we're not sure, in colors or poetry, sounds, language. And he gave you music by composers as he saw it to be.
Van Cliburn, Byron, Janis, thank you both so much for taking the time to chat with us this morning. It is 5 minutes before the hour. We'll be back.
Has been described as controlled thunder. In a career that spanned 60 years, he released 150 records and won more than 20 Grammy Awards. Horowitz said playing the piano was the coordination of mind, heart, and finger, and emotion was the key. His love of music was inspired by his mother, an amateur pianist. Horowitz was born in Kiev in 1904. He began formal piano lessons at age 6 and later studied at the Kiev Conservatory. He left the Soviet Union in 1925, vowing never to return. But he did make an emotional return in 1986 for us.
And the greatest legend of the piano in the 20th century. Horowitz died of a heart attack Sunday in New York. He was 85. His fellow musicians say they were hypnotized by him. One called him pure music. Another says that Horowitz's death leaves a vacuum that no one can fill.
These hands. These are the hands of Vladimir Horowitz, who died last week. He was special to us on Sunday morning. To people who love music, he was Babe Ruth or Balanchine or Barrymore, the best. What hands those were. We will be remembering Horowitz later on. There are 27 bones in the human hand, many attached muscles and tendons and ligaments and capillaries to bring blood, and thousands of nerve endings to sense and to signal. There is all that in any hand. But in these hands was very much more. These are the hands of Vladimir Horowitz, the greatest pianist of our time. He died last week at the age of 85. 3 years ago, we went to Russia with Horowitz and sent back to you on a Sunday morning his piano concert from Moscow. I was in the room and have never forgotten his hands. You here at home must remember them too. In his hands were thunder and lightning, and then the gentle sound of distant rain. What this one man could do with the bones and muscles and nerves of his hands astonished the world for much of this century. It was in 1986 that he returned to his native Russia after an absence of 61 years. He wanted to play once more, he said, in the land of his birth before he died. Only a single poster announced his coming. The poster said, Vladimir Horowitz, USA. That single poster was enough. It was enough to bring eager crowds to the Moscow Conservatory of Music, enough to make people wait all night for even the slim chance of a ticket, and some had been waiting for much longer than one night.
From my childhood, it was my dream to hear Horowitz in life. I have got many records, and now my dream will come true.
In the human hand are 27 bones and muscles and tendons and ligaments and capillaries and nerves. And in these hands, far more than all that. seemed himself to be looking on, a little bemused himself by what his hands could do. He seemed himself to be watching the wild play of those independently alive fingers, teasing, chasing one another, racing and dashing and striking by 3s and 5s and 7s in wonderful patterns over and under and around. He seemed quietly proud, as a father might be, of all his gifted little children and the amazing things they had learned to do. Had played for 2 hours. That was not enough for people who had waited so long for this dream of theirs to come true. They yearned to go on dreaming. And so Vladimir Horowitz returned to the stage. Nobody in the hall was prepared to weep that Sunday in Moscow. They did not know he was about to play Traumerei. Traumerei, Dreaming, is from Robert Schumann's Memories of Childhood.